D 286735, State of Nevada versus Douglas Warrenbeck. Record should reflect the presence of Mr. Warrenbeck in custody with counsel representing the state. Time set, sentencing. Any legal cause or reason to delay adjudication? Mr. Harris.
We are prepared, Your Honor.
Hearing no reason to delay, Mr. Warrenbeck, you're adjudicated guilty of pandering a child, a felony offense. My notes reflect state retains the right to argue. Ms. Piper, are you arguing this case, or is it Mr. Martinez?
I am arguing this.
All right, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge, I'm going to ask you in regard to this case to sentence the defendant to the maximum sentence, which is a 4 to 10. I understand by looking through his psychosexual that I think they deemed him a moderate risk to offend, but I disagree with the Department of Parole and Probation. When you look at the defendant's history, and I have given the reports in regard to his California case, I gave that to counsel. When you look at what happened, the underlying reports, essentially this defendant goes on a chat room in his other case, and he sort of talks to somebody, and they're going to exchange child pornography. The state of California and Novato County ends up getting involved, and they find that there is child pornography on the defendant's computer. Essentially, he had 5 and 6-year-olds, but then he explains to the police that he actually likes 15 and 16-year-olds, but when they actually do a forensic look at the computer, it's actually 13 and 14-year-olds. The defendant has a conviction for that in California, which is a misdemeanor, and they put him, the state of California puts him on unsupervised probation. He then meets up with a juvenile in this case, has sex with her in the state of California, which my understanding is they're not going to prosecute because I've spoken to the jurisdictions up and down Marin County. He then brings that 16-year-old to Nevada. He crosses state lines with her. He then tells the police that he knows she's a juvenile, or he finds out that he's going to have a threesome with her, or watch her have a threesome with another juvenile. What is, I think, most offensive in this case is that this defendant calls the victim's mother, who is here and is going to give her victim impact speech, and essentially says, hey, let's negotiate. I'll have your daughter contact you if you sign an affidavit saying that I had permission to take your daughter across state lines. That is offensive to the state. He should be a registered sex offender, which is what he's going to be after you adjudicate him in this case. But the fact that he likes minors and has admitted to it, has a misdemeanor conviction for it, then brings a juvenile across state lines admitting that he's either going to have sex with her or watch her have sex with another juvenile, and then calls the victim's mother to say, hey, can you get me out of some legal trouble and sign this affidavit? Oh, and by the way, I'll put you in contact with your daughter. He should be doing the maximum amount of time. He is a danger to the community. He's a danger not only to the community in Clark County, but as also in California, Marin County, because he hasn't changed his behavior. He goes from watching child pornography to actually making contact with juveniles and taking them across state lines. For that, Your Honor, we feel that he has earned the 4 to 10 years, and we are asking you to sentence him to that.
Mr. Warrenbeck, this is your opportunity to present any information, mitigation, of sentence. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, I am sorry for everything that's happened. I've hurt a lot of people in this. I could have predicted the consequences that what started out innocent amplified itself to these things. Like I said, when I hear it from there, it's like, it's a whole different story from what my perspective is. But it's not how we argue that.
Well, you don't argue that you took a 16-year-old prostitute, you consider her a prostitute, and brought her here to Las Vegas from California to engage in sexual activity. You've never denied that.
Yeah, I'm responsible. On this technical basis, I'm responsible for everything.
Okay.
Right. But it's like a different language. I'm hearing it just different than what my perspective.
Okay.
That's all. My perspective is so different. I do totally admit my life was falling apart. I lost control of the situation that was in front of me. I've heard a lot of people saying I was supposed to be the more mature adult, and that I should know better. And I have not been in this situation before. I say 35 years ago, I met someone who was 16 when I was 20, and she's my wife today, or still technically my wife today, and married 12 years. And that was the last time I ever had an experience. It was a different era. We met mentioned child pornography, because the way I'm hearing it's so different. Didn't even know it existed until this internet comes along, and it exposed, you know, you see regular pornography and suddenly you see something young, you can't tell what age it is, so not all of that comes out, because it currently, you know, it was, and that took, you know, over a 10-year period, I started meeting people on the internet, that I never would have met in real life. At the age of 53 is where all this misdemeanor started, and what's happening now. What was I doing for 53 years before that? I didn't even know how to get in trouble. And then suddenly, one thing right after the next. On probation for a misdemeanor, I said, well, how can I ever get in trouble? I can't imagine. And the next, by crazy coincidence, all of this happens. And they say, oh, I'm blaming the internet. But I would say that technology has changed things.
You don't seem to be accepting any personal responsibility for decisions that you've made. Is that,
Well, no, I say I was supposed to be the more mature adult.
yeah?
And
Well, you were the only adult.
right, well, there was somebody technically over 18, right, and I was, again, I was technical probation requirements. So I wasn't supposed to be anybody under 18 without somebody over 18. Oh, well, then technically there was somebody over 18, so there was no violation in the probation. If there was a hearing, it was taken off the calendar for that reason. But again, it still came back to, I'm, you know, 55-year-old now, 55-year-old. What am I doing with a 16-year-old? What is going on here? And even I would say, what is going on here? I did not plan to meet this person, somebody who was underage. It was somebody who was set up to meet for odd reasons. But at that time, I was already having financial and stability problems, independent of all this. So that's where I admit that I did not control the situation and I should have. And I was unprepared for what was happening to me, what the consequences. I couldn't imagine the consequences of all of it.
Sure, that's true.
Yeah, this is stuff I watched on television. This is a world that I don't even know how to get in trouble. Next thing you know, I'm falling into one after the next. But the technology, I would say, supported it. The text messaging and picture transfers over a phone. The whole thing was this case was all done through a phone, which was not even possible 5 years ago. It's not an excuse, but it's just that times have changed. And I was unprepared, and I'm into technology, so I maximize the use of technology. And next thing I know, the things that would hardly be any problem suddenly come to me. And I can't even dream. I couldn't have dreamed this all happened. I couldn't imagine that. I haven't seen a movie done like this, and now it's happening. He's been in a courtroom and been in jail. The first time I'm in jail in my entire life. The misdemeanor never was exposed to jail. So, and a misdemeanor to me is 1 year max. So,
You understand, now the DA's saying I should give you a maximum sentence, in part because they're saying you haven't, you're a continuing threat to the community, and there's some relevance to that.
Yeah,
I mean,
the thing, well, as a child
you're an articulate man. You're educated. You're a professional man, and you engage in conduct involving a 16-year-old girl that is troubling in its own right.
It never, I said, prior to 35 years ago, I run into this. But again, prostitution. I admit I was involved in some meeting girls in prostitution, but they were legal age and never an issue. And I had relationships for years, and after that, it's not about exchanging money for services kind of thing. It was relationships and I never thought of it, and never thought of any legal issues of that. But when it became underage, she's going to be 18 in a few weeks anyways, but once you cross that age, again, a technical number, everything's different. That's all these things are based underage, child pornography.
Right.
Right, and first it was again, a couple pictures out of hundreds of thousands of regular files in a computer. It took them 9 months to find a couple photos to find something. Again, the idea of having your computer or something in the privacy of your own home become contraband. couldn't comprehend.
You're talking about your California situation,
yeah,
not the
9
one here.
police officers pouring into your house that are, no search warrant. I allow them in. There was nothing to arrest me on the original thing. So it was just incomprehensible to me, this whole thing. But what happens is, like I said, when I hear it there, all that story, it's like, who is she referring to? And so that's what I lost, is perspective. I was lost in this world and I didn't have a perspective where I was, what was happening from the legal standpoint. And again, I could have excuses about every little thing, how she begged me. And I would say to her,
Well, and I'm sorry to cut off Mr. Warrenbeck, but I think what he's trying to say is, at the time he was arrested in this particular situation, obviously he directly contributed to it, and he has always taken responsibility for what he did in this case. Some of his original concerns stemmed from the original charges, which involve charges involving first-degree kidnapping, things of that nature, which, when a person who has engaged in the behavior in which he did, if they were charged with kidnapping, we could all understand a layperson not fully appreciating how broad the definition of kidnapping is here in Nevada. So when we hear kidnapping, we think of someone being duct taped and thrown in a trunk, just like in the movies, like Mr. Warrenbeck said. But clearly, while he's not taking responsibility or not making any admissions regarding the underlying charges, the underlying facts, he does admit and has always stood behind the fact that, yes, he was in the wrong. When he references the perspective, or the loss of perspective, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think what he was about to get into, just to expedite matters, is how the approximately 13 months that he's been in custody has certainly given him a great deal more perspective on not only his situation, but the impact of his decisions on the lives of many other people who have been involved in this.
Frankly, Mr. Warrenbeck, that's what I'm missing from your entire allocution. I'm missing any sense of the impact that your decisions and choices in bringing this girl from California have on her. And you say, well, she's 16, but it's a technical number. Well, she's 16, and you're 50.
right,
And I see no articulated insight on what that means in terms of impact on her.
when I knew there was something wrong being with her, again, once I find out
Coming
she's
from
16.
California, the police say they smell marijuana coming from your car, and you've brought this young girl from California, and you admit openly you're very forthright based upon the statement of facts in the supplemental PSI. Yeah, you're gonna have sex with her, or well, maybe you were just gonna watch. You realized that she was underage, not an adult. You told the police she did not have permission to bring her, and that you, quote, stopped having sex with her but continued to stay in the hotel with her. That, maybe she would just go have sex with somebody else and you would...
Yeah, I was wondering, one statement she had said to me that it rings in my ear all the time. Because I would mention, when I find out she's 16,
This could be good.
you should go back to your mother. School's starting. I know there's something wrong now. And she goes, don't talk to me about the other.
You heard the DA talk a few minutes ago about you reaching out to her mom, who's here in court, and I guess is going to address the court, about the contacts that you tried to encourage the mother to sign documents.
Oh, yeah, it's, again...
Troubling
right,
proffer.
From that point of view, but I'll tell you how that
Well, and if I may, Your Honor, that does stem from the kidnapping charge, because the kidnapping is, again, more broad in Nevada than most lay people would think it would be. And that stemmed from how she, because the victim in this case was a minor, the issue where Mr. Warrenbeck contacted the mother stemmed from how he wanted to, admittedly and potentially inappropriately, somehow reverse engineer the existence of permission for the two of them to go across state lines.
I guess one person's reverse engineering is another person's tampering.
Well, Judge, we have if you want to hear the voicemails, we have it.
Oh, and I'm sure the victim's mother can attest to what she herself heard on that voicemail.
Right.
Whether it was a voicemail or what have you, but on that recording, I believe it was a voicemail. But, again, it wasn't I wouldn't necessarily construe it as tampering necessarily. Obviously, it was inappropriate. We're not disputing that. But that was more regarding the kidnapping aspect of the case rather than the other admittedly inappropriate actions that Mr. Warrenbeck took. He never should have been in a relationship with this young lady as soon as he realized what her age was. One could argue that a 50-year-old man should not be dating an 18-year-old girl or a girl who's 18 to 20 years old, which is what Mr. Warnbeck originally thought he was getting himself into, that is unseemly, and I'm not disputing that. But obviously the relationship should have ended immediately upon Mr. Warnbeck finding out that this girl was underage. And again, he's taking responsibility for those actions. I think we're just taking a very roundabout way of him informing the court how, as the court specifically requested of him, to see what his understanding is of the impact of those actions to which he admits on the victim and derivatively the victim's family in that case. And I think that's where Mr. Warnbeck was about to go before I cut him off a second
Anything
time.
else you want to say, Mr. Warnbeck?
I just want to finish up because
Okay.
it's just chaotic for me. No, she should be with her mom going to school. When I go, she's not going to school. This is wrong. She's missing school. She's not going to graduate high school. I hope she is back in high school now and going to complete it. But she would say, "You know what I can do to you. You know, don't talk to me about my mother. You know what I can do to you." She would, and there's a fight between the daughter and the mother. And I don't want to get involved in that. I don't think that I'm causing that. She was involved in prostitution with these other boys in the car, and I'm the, like you say, I'm the John. I'm not perpetrating something. I got involved in rental cars. Again, keep me away from it, and caused more financial disaster for me. And I spent 3 hours on the phone to her begging to take her, not to Vegas, it was California, but then midnight they say, "Let's go to Vegas." I lost control of the situation. I wasn't controlling this girl. She was doing her own thing. I'd see her once a week. She had her own world, and it was again. I was creating this world for her. It already existed before I met her, and I don't know what happened since then. But it was time for me. Now back to the final thing. It was time for me to grow up at the age of 55 and being in prison and maybe future prison, in jail. I've surrendered the state at this point. I don't have, I have limited energy, strength to live at this point. This is so much happened to me all at once that, like I said, decades go on. It was something I could never understand, and I run into all this. I didn't know what to do to fix it. I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know.
Mr. Paris?
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, we do have a picture painted by the state, and potentially that will be painted by the victim's mother in this case of Mr. Warnbeck as some sort of monster, someone who isn't taking responsibility for his actions, someone who is completely wrong. And to a certain extent, they're correct. He is taking responsibility for what he did. Some of the things that he did were wholly inappropriate. We're not running away from that fact. But we have the assessment done by Ms. DiPasquale, who, pursuant to the test that she employed, the static 99 and the Vaser, we have someone who came back as on the static 99, a low to moderate risk to reoffend pursuant to the evaluation. And then regarding the Vaser, he came back at the low. Now, one would assume when one would average a low and a low to moderate, that would be a low or a low to moderate overall ranking.
I don't think she factored in the prior out of California as a component of the static.
She did, because I believe there was a point given to her on the static, given to him on the static due to the prior violation. And I thought that was towards the end of the
It's a pretty
assessment.
detailed report.
It is. It is a very detailed, as these evaluations always are. But regarding the static 99, I believe he did get an additional point for, at the bottom of page, it states page 9 of 13 of the assessment. It's the last paragraph. Mr. Warnbeck did receive an additional point for having one prior non-sexual violence charge and one conviction, which is what is reflected on his PSI. Regarding that PSI, if I may, Mr. Warnbeck did want me to inform the court that it's his understanding that originally, and this is drawing your attention to page 4 of the PSI itself, regarding the arrest date from California, he indicates his belief that he was originally charged with misdemeanors, not felonies in that particular case, and that ultimately he was not charged with possession of the inappropriate material, but transportation of the inappropriate material. again, still a misdemeanor. Mr. Warnbeck did want me to point those out. I think overall, that would not
Do you have an
impact.
NCIC on them?
I actually have the California's, I called California in order to get their.
You wanna show it to Mr. Paris?
I actually have given this all to Mr. Harris.
Is it showing an
It's misdemeanors. Is that what the M is?
No, I don't think so, because I called and they told me they're.
Okay. And again, I'm not familiar with these particular documents of that format, but it looks like it states on the first page, under type of case or type, it says M. I assume that means misdemeanor as opposed to F for
Is there a
felony
comment?
or otherwise.
Yeah, but when I called the state of California, I actually talked to the court records because I was so offended that of the charges. They told me that originally he was arrested on felonies, and then the case was negotiated down to misdemeanors. And that's
What-
when they put him on.
what is the, you say you have a court
Yeah, I
document.
can, you want me to put?
How many, you tell me, yeah, I'll look at it. Is it an NCIC?
No, it's their court
It's a
document.
it's a court,
Hey. And that's why the format's a little
it's a triple I.
different.
I also have the police reports from California, Your Honor, if you want to see them.
Does it show booking as a felony?
Let me see.
PCR equivalent.
I don't have a TCR.
Well, it's definitely showing adjudication as a misdemeanor, which is accurately stated in the PSI on page 4.
And again, I think whether it was originally charged as a felony or a misdemeanor is not going to necessarily impact the court's decision as to what an appropriate sentence
Because it ultimately
is.
comes out as a misdemeanor, and
Correct,
frankly,
if I may, Bro.
sure, frankly, it's more important the nature of the conviction, possession of obscene material depicting persons under the age of 18 for sale, misdemeanor, as opposed to the level of offense, because it just shows what it shows, I guess.
Well, it shows a lack of judgment on Mr. Warrenbeck's part. It is noted in, and I don't know if this is in the PSI or the psychosexual, but there are over 150,000 discrete files, not necessarily pornographic files, but
That's
files
in the
on the computer.
psychosexual.
And I think it was two photos or two files depicted underage individuals. So it's very easy for those two to have been in a larger scale download, and that's when they just were, unbeknownst to Mr. Warrenbeck, it turned out there very well may have been underage people in there. Whether they were 13 or 14, whether they were 5 or 6, it easily could have been that type of situation. That having been said, just like he is in this case, he's taken responsibility for having those items and or transporting those items in the California case itself. So again, we have a low assessment and a low to moderate assessment, and again, those assessments did take into account the fact that this prior California situation did exist. So he was getting points for that, yet overall, Ms. DePasquale, for some reason, averaged those two together and came out with moderate. And that very well may have been because, as the court had indicated and was indicated in the PSI, Mr. Warrenbeck didn't appear to have a sufficient level of empathy towards the impact of his actions on the victim. While he is a rather articulate individual, he does have a good background regarding not only his education, but also a rather consistent work history in the engineering type fields. I think that's somewhat indicative of how he tends to view things, talking about technical violations and things of that nature. Engineers tend to be more mathematically inclined, and they're more focused on things like, well, technically it should be this and it should be that. They don't necessarily have the appropriate worldview when it comes to the gray areas of life that everyone in this room, well, professionally at least, tends to travel. So I think he gets hung up more on these minutiae, these technicalities, pursuant to his more engineering-related mindset, as opposed to the bigger picture. Clearly, in my discussions with him, he clearly appreciates the fact that the victim in this case was harmed. He was a troubled, and still arguably is a troubled individual. He encountered another admittedly troubled individual at the time that they first met. She, not to castigate the victim, but she certainly had her own struggles. And Mr. Warrenbeck admittedly took advantage of that situation for his own benefit. I don't think he saw it as such, but when a 50-year-old man is having a relationship with, admittedly, underage, but what he perceived to be an 18-year-old girl, that is problematic. And I think Mr. Warnbeck now, after being in custody for 13 months, essentially, begins to appreciate that. I just don't think he's very good at articulating those facts to the court.
Okay.
I try. Oh, by the way, I worked for that company as a hearing assistant receiver there. That's how long that.
Guess there's an irony there.
So, based upon the facts as we have them today, what I'm going to ask that this court do is as follows. In lieu of sentencing Mr. Warnbeck directly to prison, give him an opportunity for the privilege of probation, yet give him a rather high suspended sentence. The PSI recommended a 2-year, I believe it was a 28-month minimum with a 72-month maximum. I'm requesting that the court increase that rather significantly to a 96-month maximum with a 36-month minimum, and then suspend that sentence over his head. Obviously, he has some very stringent conditions that he will need to live up to, assuming this court does give him the privilege of probation. Obviously, Mr. Warnbeck has spent over a year in custody. He does plan to return to the Northern California area to his family, assuming the court does give him the privilege of probation. Obviously, there'll be a no contact order with anyone associated with this case, and I don't think he has any intent to do so. I would not oppose there being an order, assuming the court gives him probation, precluding him from having access to the internet unless it is specifically for work and on a work-related computer. He himself admitted that it's kind of a whole new world here. 5 years ago, he couldn't have had the access to the things that he had access to that were problematic, and that kind of led him down this spiral that results in him standing in court today. Again, he will have significant and stringent registration requirements for the rest of his life regarding this particular case, and he embraces that fact. He knows that this will be a zero-tolerance situation for him, and if he does not abide by the rules of this court, he will be spending a significant amount of time in prison. We had this discussion as recently as yesterday, and he is willing not only to take responsibility for what he's done, but he also is willing to make a promise to the court that obviously, if he does make mistakes and does not abide by its rules, he knows he's going to have a significant prison stay ahead of him, which is something that he certainly, like the rest of the individuals here, wants to avoid as best as possible. Assuming the court is not inclined to give him probation in this case, I would ask that the court follow the recommendation in the PSI, towards which Mr. Warnbeck does have 386 days credit pursuant to page 6 of the PSI.
You have a victim impact, Ms. Pack?
I do, Your Honor.
You just always want to testimony about the police actions, how you just help with nothing but the truth to help you God? You're gonna have to speak up, and I need you to state your full name, spelling your first and last name for the record.
My name is Nawzat Al-Sarraj. I am mother of Amanda Al-Sarraj, the victim.
I need your first name spelled and your last name, please.
Nouzat, last name Kanbar.
And what would you like to tell me? And be seated, be comfortable.
Your Honor, just make me sick. I have a hard time getting up looking at this man. He damaged my baby's life. And according to what just he said, his attorney, he said, for him being in prison now for 13 months, he make him realize, and waking up. That's making me even more sick when he just right away mentioned that my daughter can be in few weeks. He know even when my daughter can be in a few weeks, 18 years old, and he is sick. When I spoke with him first, I was desperate, my mom. My daughter started to disappear. And when I went to her room and I looked in her stuff, I find the number. I have no clue. I thought it's just like one of her friends, teenager. I called the number. Hello? He answered the phone. And I'm just like, I am Amanda's mom. Do you have any clue where is she or who is she? And he said, well, I am here just a friend. And I'm just like, please, I'm a desperate mind. Do you have any clue where is she? Long story short, he make it look like he has no clue where is she or anything. Finding out he is the one, he bought her the phone, and he's the one who paying for her phone until the very last minute. Just before he got arrested, I have FBI to look for him. I have the DA. I thank God for the client I have. They direct me to do what I have to do. I spoke with him and I said, my daughter is 16 years old. Who are you to her? He said, oh, she's just a friend of someone. And I'm like, here, Daddy. I said, please. Anyway, he damaged my life. My daughter was virgin when he had her. And you know what, in our culture, we cannot have a daughter not virgin. And you know what, you damaged my baby forever. I have a hard time with my baby now to talk with her. All my family. He damaged, I take her to therapy. I cannot even have a conversation with my daughter because she changed. My daughter changed her. And you know what, if he is not here, she will be again, because you know what, he is sick. This guy is sick and he is gonna ask my daughter again. He called her, it's a phone call. I have phone call from him. And lucky, I have his phone in the phone, and on that day I was talking to one of my clients, the one who directed me to the DA and all that, his attorney in California. And as I'm talking to my client, I said, guess what? He said, what? I say, oh my God, that creep calling me. Should I answer? What should I do? He said, well, answer, find out what he wanted, what he need. At the time when I'm talking with him on the phone, the line went to voicemail. Sure enough, he left me voicemail. And I would love you.
This is the voicemail everybody's been talking about?
Absolutely. I would love you to hear this, Your Honor. I'm sorry, I'm just like, look what he told me.
I know you don't want to hear from Douglas Warnback. I know you don't want to hear from me regarding Amanda's situation in Nevada, but I would like to make an agreement with you that I would never be seeing her again, for sure, if you can make an affidavit saying that I did allow her as to be a designated driver to go to Nevada across the state boundary. It could save me a major legal disaster that I'm in. I'm Doug Warnback, 415-377-8778 or 415-320-1029. I greatly appreciate it. Even, you know, I want to be a designated driver for her safety. She was asking and pleading with me for 2 hours to take that drive with her friends. It got me in trouble. But if you could sign an affidavit that you did give me special permission that if I were a designated driver, that to allow her to end up in Nevada, that if you sign that, I have a major crime taken off my record, or because I will be going to jail anyways if I can't get out of this. So if you can do something, I know I would want to end this perpetuation of her delinquency, and this is one way to finally do it, because I know I was helping her be not at home. So if you, for your consideration, thank you.
And we continue right away, called me right after, and he continued to say this.
This is Doug Warnback for one last comment that I believe that I can convince Amanda once and for all that she needs to stay with you and as a family, that if she obviously sees me in jail, knows that I'm in jail for this, and that all it took was your signature, I think that she's willing to consider that seriously. Find once and for all that for my safety and my concern and hers, that she would finally consider that she's done all the trouble she can do, and that she's now ready to start fixing things. And the first thing she would do is get me out of the trouble that I'm in. So that's why I believe I do have some convincing power that Amanda would finally listen to. Thank you.
Okay, and then she disappeared. I got her back because she's in juvenile hall. I put her in 50-50. It broke my heart to see my baby, that innocent girl, she was virgin, that she is going to all this. So I got her back, and she is now in juvenile hall. So he doesn't know where is she. Guess what he said?
This is Doug. We used to have Amanda's friend. We talked on the phone a couple times. So I'm 415-320-1029. I need to talk to you. about Amanda, where is she? So, or there's something going on. So I'm going to keep calling you. And go from here.
Just talk to me now.
Why he need to know where is my 16 years old, where he knew it's 16 years old? You're sick. You deserve to be for life. We have to really protect all the girls, because guess what? He's gonna do it for another and another and another. And if I ask anybody here in court if it's their baby and this is what happened to her, and he is very much waiting for her to be 18, if he will be in the street again, guess what? He's gonna come back to her because he called again and again and again. And to see her for Vegas, he said he is gonna have her have like what they call it, the threesome or and watch her. He damaged us. My family is damaged, hurt, financially, emotionally. We are sick of just having our daughter the way she is now. And you know what? I ask you, Your Honor, to give him the maximum. If there is a life in prison, I will ask for this, because that's it. I cannot see my daughter. She is not virgin anymore. I dream about my daughter to be one day, this beautiful bride walking around. But guess what? He broke this to me because I'm not proud anymore. I'm not proud anymore with my daughter. That's our culture. And I can't take it. I have a hard time to get up and wake up when you called my name. Just listening to him and his crap. I ask you, Your Honor, please. I am afraid now, if he get ditched a little bit, and my daughter really 18, that she's gonna walk out, and really I have no control to protect her, that he will get her back. And he will. But my daughter now is out after I have her in juvenile hall. After I came here to Vegas several times. My daughter now, I'm working on her with therapy to get my relation back with her, because when I came here to the judge once and I talked with him and I told him, I cannot take my daughter back with me. I'm signing her death certificate if I'm taking her back with me. Until today she tell me like, you don't love me. Deep inside my daughter, she know I love her, but she using it. She using all this. She's been damaged. This kid been damaged. So if he got out and my daughter 18, I can't have control over that. And he is sick. I swear he's gonna do it to another girl. He is sick. He is on child pornography and probation since 2011. Why he is in the street?
I just need you to focus on the impact that it's had to your family, all right?
So it is, I ask you, Your Honor, I ask you for the maximum. As I said, if there is life in prison, I will ask for that, and I'll appreciate your time.
All right, very good. Mr. Paris, any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Piper, any questions? Anything else either side?
Submit it, Your Honor.
Mr. Warnbeck, your actions have consequences. Your history is very concerning to me. Your lack of empathy is equally, if not more, troubling, because I look forward to some of the functions or things I have to think about is whether or not you're an ongoing, continuing threat to the community based upon the facts of the case, your history, and everything I've heard. And frankly, you don't demonstrate empathy to me. I think you're more concerned about the fact that you find yourself in custody as a function of this action and your frustrations with that. I'm troubled by the phone calls and the continuing conduct that you had with the mother. In accordance with law of the state of Nevada, I'm going to structure from the top of the range, 48 to 120 months. Nevada Department of Corrections is a sentence. 386 days credit for time served, $25 administrative assessment fee, $150 DNA fee. Looks like they had to extradite you, $639.10. Psychosexual, $760. $250 indigent defense fund fee. Mr. Warnbeck, do you have any questions about the sentence structure? Very good. Anything, lawyers?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Oh, lifetime registration.
Gets to register as a sex offender.
He must register as a sex offender upon his release from the custody of the state of Nevada. Next case.
Thank you.
Going back to bottom 3, Graham. See, 29159.